right, let me share my screen. I'm
Um,
still moving a little slowly today. So.
so that will also help for people from, well, Hema is in India. There's a person, this week we are giving presentations in Fast Start Europe. And there's a person that out of the meeting this morning, we gave the meeting on use cases. I think use cases and stories. And Hema did a demo of the toolkit. Someone was very interested from Europe on supporting PowerPC. I'm guessing when you said Power, I assume PowerPC. To have support in the toolkit, do the same. They want to do the same workshops that we are doing and showing. They want to do it for PowerPC customers on OpenShift. So I sent him a reply to the email with initial ideas, but we can set up a meeting directly with them and then start writing stories, right?
So for that,
What does that mean,
yeah,
right?
I was
And
gonna say,
what does that? We can start very light, right? But I want to write them down. Like one example could be um, everything runs on x86, the DevOps pipeline and everything, but there's one piece that needs to run on Power, building the image. I know Go you can cross compile, but our customers, not everyone uses Go, but but building the image for PowerPC, right, with the Docker.power or multi-architecture, trampoline to an OpenShift cluster that runs in Power, run build that there, and create the image and push it, and then continue with the CI/CD pipeline. And then Argo from the x86 can deploy to that other cluster in PowerPC. So at the end of the day, you have CI/CD pipeline in x86. In Power, you run your workload, which at the end of the day, that should be like scenario one. Like I want to run PowerPC on, maybe I don't want to run DevOps in PowerPC, but I should want to run and deploy with GitOps and build with Tekton and at the end of the day, manage the workload on PowerPC. So that'll be like the smallest one, right? The minimum, the MVP.
right. Yeah, and go from there. Yeah, I think that'd be good.
The
So
other one is like running everything. Tekton, I think it added support for PowerPC images lately. Argo may have images that from PowerPC. I don't know the other ones, right? Artifactory, SonarQube. But maybe it doesn't make sense to run those things in x86. It could be a mixed cluster, right? That you have worker nodes that are x86 and Power. So you have the affinity rules for the Tekton pipelines run in x86, and then the workloads, when they get deployed in your YAML, you put your affinity rules to run the workload in the PowerPC nodes, and that's a mixed architecture, CPU architecture.
yeah, but we haven't explored much of those more advanced deployment models either, right? Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So starting with recording, and one of the other bit of feedback I saw was, "Hey, get to the demo earlier." I think they were bored of us talking and like just seeing Hema demo. So maybe AP will change the order. But yeah, so that's just for everybody that's joined. We'll go through the backlog. But we are. Last week was week one of Fast Start in Americas. We're doing Europe this week at 5 a.m. for me. 6 for Carlos, and so we're getting a lot of, we're demonstrating the toolkit quite a bit. I think there's 6 different sessions we're doing, and the toolkit gets a plug in each one of them. And then even in this 7th, we're helping moderate a discussion on Friday that Roland and others are doing on OpenShift objections, and there's some toolkit content there too. So that's part of why we're going to start recording this and making it available. So just a caveat for I saw a couple joined after we started recording. If there's any IBM internal stuff that we want to talk about, we'll save it to the end and we'll stop the recording. But we'll publish this open source project, just make it available. So let's start with kind of what was accomplished. So the review QA column, what was accomplished this past week. And work on kind of what's in progress, and then we'll talk about the backlog. So there's a couple of things that were added there. So I know Carlos and Bobby. I didn't see Bobby join. We had a conflict. Went through a pretty detailed walkthrough of the GitOps CD piece, and they found some issues with the documentation, and more broadly some issues with documentation. So Bobby submitted a couple of PRs, and there's some of the other things we'll talk about are some things that came out of that. But that's good. We've got updates there, and we'll continue to update. There's some rework we're going to do on the Argo, and generally, some of the feedback was looking at the dev guide from the outside in, and it's sometimes, I guess the feedback was it's a little confusing on where do I go. We have getting started, we have workshops, we have other, but for someone just coming in, what do I do? And so this notion of, and I think we had this idea that we've been working towards, but this notion of, and it's part of what's in these backlog items, but like a quick overview and a quick getting started of how do I get up and running quickly? Because right now we kind of mix details, especially on the day zero part, details on what does it take to get a cluster installed and everything, and then go through. So kind of focus on, hey, well, let's get up and running quickly. Get a cluster wherever you get it from. Do the quick install. Run through the scenarios. The deploy your first app, or build your first app, deploy your first app, promote the app, and then it's some advanced content of monitoring and operator development, and then if they want to do a deep dive on, hey, how do I set up, if I want to customize the iteration 0 deployment, or I have other environment, then you could deep dive on one particular thing. So clean that up so that it's a little more direct in terms of where do I go to get started. And then I think we still have to discuss whether the workshop is the vehicle, or we say just run the workshop, or if we do the quick walkthrough and then, hey, here's the workshop is I don't know. We'll see how we do that, because I think the workshop is fairly straightforward as well, in terms of that. So that's some of the feedback we got, and then there's a ton of broken links that we for better or worse, we've been restructuring the page model to match the menu, which is looking back, not a very good idea, because then it breaks our links everywhere. So we'll get those fixed. So that's a lot of kind of what I put those at the top of the backlog. We can knock those out pretty quickly, and then some CI pieces to make sure that we can't push a build that has broken links. So there's some capabilities in Gatsby if we can make them work.
So that's priority, because we got feedback from someone, that is just found out about the toolkit, visited the website, and started navigating a few pages, and he got a few broken links, 4 or 4. So he got the impression that this was a website and project that wasn't maintained right, and not very good, just because of that first impression.
Right.
So it's also good to invest some time and energy on broken links, and also the navigation piece, and testing our pages. So that's what I did with Bobby. I tested the GitOps page, and some of the order wasn't correct, and he was using IBM registry where the documentation was assuming they were using the OpenShift internal registry. So I went, I think it was Friday, and I went over back to back to see how best to clean that up. And I did a first tab on it. So Bobby's going to take a look.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I saw it one in here somewhere. We'll get to that. Some of the changes you'd made. Okay. Yeah. So we'll talk about that a little more when we get those cards in a second. But yeah, that's a big part, and it should be fairly easy to knock out. And as you said, we should prioritize that, because it does give a bad first impression of the site, and just generally.
Well, and that's what I was anticipating. That's why I was rushing to get the workshop done for fast start, right? Because at least we can point them like, start here in the workshop, and that's a safe place. Like easy to deploy a cluster, one click, deploy the toolkit, one click, deploy the workshop, one click, follow the lab, a few clicks, all right, copy paste.
Right.
They should come out with the impression like, this is not that complicated. This is easy, right? To the point that they ask like, how much does it cost and what is the license?
Right.
Like it's free. I just maybe charge for coffee, but that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we will get some traffic from Fast Start as well. So good to get those knocked out. So the couple things, there was a bug with the pipeline. So if you ran OC pipeline, sometimes it wouldn't print the URL to your running pipeline, and that came down to a permissions issue. The way that the CLI was originally written, it was trying to get the route URL from the route in a different namespace, and if you are a basic user, you don't have access. So it's been simplified so that works properly. And generally, we've been working to do that, strip down the level of access needed to do anything. So this works well in a lockdown cluster. So there's a bunch of the workshop, as Carlos just mentioned, items that are out there, and some of that is what we're demoing this week, like this basic CI pipeline. Yeah, so we start with the basic one. There's the 3-tier application. There's the Argo CD and app mod, and then the piece we're working on currently is Cloud Pack for integration items. So that's some of these stories here too. And then there was one other, this is a minor thing, but in one of our modules, there's a deprecation warning. It shows up all over the place.
What's that one about?
So in the container platform, there's a deprecation warning that pretty soon they were going to remove one of the fields that we're using. So it's just maintenance on the
IBM Terraform module.
Right, the Terraform provider, they've deprecated some attributes.
Okay.
So it's a maintenance for that. Okay, so that's those, and I think some of these in progress might be as well, close to being finished. But so the first one, so Larry, have you been able to do the Watson AI Ops much?
Yeah, I've done some investigation, and I don't know. Do you want me to set up a meeting so we can just discuss my findings and
Yeah, when you get to a
move
point
forward?
where it's good to kind of collect your notes and see where we proceed, that would be good.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, the Cloud Pack for integration, this is part of, let me find this. This is part of a Epic. It's over here somewhere.
You can click on the
Well, I was going to try to filter this one. Filter.
Okay.
So a number of stories around Cloud Pack for integration use cases. And so we want to be able to demonstrate how the toolkit is used to build applications that consume Cloud Pack for integration resources like App Connect. That's where we started. Integration with API Connect is another. And then we had event streams, but with the Confluent, we'll have to see how we're going to handle that. Whether it's installing Confluent and building everything off of that now, since that is the preferred event stream vendor now, not our own. And then service mesh isn't really part of it, but kind of expanding the stories. So I know Hollis has been working on taking some assets we have from customer engagement and building them into the toolkit for the pipeline to build a bar file and push it out. And then I was working on the modules to be able to deploy App Connect. And so the model that we want to go with is, in the future, customers don't say, I want Cloud Pack for integration. You would say, I need App Connect, I need API Gateway, or API Connect, I need, name your tool that is part of Cloud Pack for integration. And you pick that tool, and all of the other prerequisites like the Cloud Pak catalog, and there's a platform navigator that has to be installed. All the prereqs get done automatically for you. So that's what happens now with the App Connect. You can pick App Connect, and then we're going to do a demo here next hour. So we'll see how this goes. But where you can, with the, because there's another story, we're doing this catalog builder where you can pick. So I can run this real quick just to show. So it's reading the library, the catalog of modules. We have metadata that we're capturing for each module. And so you can filter which provider do you want, if it's going to be IBM Cloud. This is just a filter on, if you want the IBM SaaS modules like API, App ID, and Log DNA, or if you're not, then you don't get those options. And then which cluster. So based on that first selection, because I said IBM Cloud, I get both OpenShift and Kubernetes. If I'd said IBM Cloud, it's only OpenShift is my option. And I dropped OpenShift 3 from this. So if I say that, then I can pick which platform, if I want the generic OpenShift or the our IBM container platform.
Rocks.
Then it presents. So these are in categories. We can modify the categories, but the dev tools you want, and you can pick any of these. I'm going to turn all those off. And then what image registry do you want? And then, so right now, these are the only two middleware in there because some of the others I have to finish setting up the module. But so if I say I want App Connect and nothing else, then it generates. So it generates the Terraform for you. And so I picked App Connect and it sucked in the catalog and the platform navigator automatically because the metadata says that they're dependencies, and it sets it all up for you and generates the variables file. It also, because I said IBM platform, it generated a tile for me as well. So the idea is that this backend, I know Matt and team are working on a front end. So the idea is that this is the backend that plugs into their front end. So a GUI, and we envision it something like the start.spring.io, where you can go there and pick your modules, maybe log in and connect to a backend. And then when you pick it, either push your tile directly to your cloud account or generate, push to a Git repo. So that's the goal. But right now it's generating the Terraform, and then, being able, instead of picking from a menu, to provide an input file.
And not IBM Common Services, right? That will be pulled in because
Right.
when you install one of those two.
Yeah, so that comes automatically in this Cloud Pak catalog. Is the catalog, the Common Services catalog gets installed. Both the Cloud Pak and Common Services get installed with this module. And then Platform Nav, whenever you install an operator, it'll automatically suck in the Common Services modules or operators that it needs. So you don't ever have to directly reference those. So that's the goal with all of this, is to get to where you have a module to install App Connect. You never really care that it's Cloud Pak for Cloud Pak for integration, Cloud Pak for data, wherever it comes from. The only choice, and it's not clear in the metadata right now, is if you want the IBM hosted version or you want the in-cluster Cloud Pak version, right? Being able to distinguish the SaaS offering from the in-cluster installer. So we'll kind of clean up that metadata, but that's...
The API Connect on public cloud, right? API Connect on public cloud or the API Connect in cluster.
Right. So we need to be able to clearly distinguish between the Cloud Pak version. That's why I put CP at the front. I don't know that that's best, but a way to distinguish between the Cloud Pak version that's in cluster and the SaaS hosted version.
One thing, can you do this on this view? Can you move the API Connect to in progress and assign it to Brian? I think that's Brian's story he's working on. Right, Brian, on the API Connect to Kafka.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, and there was the Kafka one or the service mesh one too, right? Or not Kafka, the Event Streams one.
He's working on the MQ, right? We can add a new one for MQ.
Yeah, I didn't have MQ. I'll add that. So we don't have a module right now for MQ, but that's easy enough to create a new module now. We have the framework. You just install that operator. And there's interest from the CloudPack teams, right, to showcase how we're consuming that. And a lot of times with the sales folks at FastStart, one of the questions is, well, how does this help me sell CloudPacks, or how does this relate to CloudPack? So it's, even though we may not be demoing a CloudPack feature, the process is always the same. So, but being able to highlight, hey, this is how you would, build a pipeline that generates resources that get deployed and integrate with, whether it's event streams or MQ out of the CloudPack or whatever. So that's this one. And so this is perhaps can be moved to review. I wanted to. So the modules exist, and I created a test version of iteration 0. I'm trying to work through how we provide it in iteration 0 without deploying CloudPack every time. Right? That's apart from catalog builder. That's the value ultimately when we have catalog builder, is we wouldn't need static iteration 0, and it would be, then it would be, you just provide your catalog, whether it's an input file that lists the modules you want, or it's a or you just input it through the prompt. But then we don't need the static I0. The other thing it can do, and I met last week with a team that's building a similar GUI, from the product team that's building a similar GUI, or looking at a similar GUI for like catalog builder, and we'll see where that goes. But I lost my train of thought. The part of the challenge, like with the static. That's what I remember. So because we have them static, we've built these modules to be more complex than maybe they should be, right? So we have our catalog, our IBM container module can provision both IKS or OpenShift, can provision both classic or VPC. And we did that so that we could have a static stages and then configure it through variables. Right? But with catalog builder, we could make a bunch of smaller, simpler modules, and then you dynamically pick which module. So then they're easier to maintain, easier for people to understand, easier to add a new one. Because part of the metadata, and I'll just show this real quick and go back. So in the modules, just so everybody sees this real quick, there's a catalog YAML. So this is where you just register by category. And this is where we can change these categories however we want. But by category, what's the link to the repo? And I add the name now. That's not required, but because we're actually generating, it generates this documentation each time it builds. So, because I was maintaining it by hand before. So this is a nice listing of all of the modules that we have. And then it builds the full catalog here. So this is where we can put, so there's platforms that are supported. So if you pick OpenShift 4 and there's a module that only supports Kubernetes, then that would be filtered out. Right, so that's ways we can build in some of that and say this module only applies to OpenShift 4. So if you pick OpenShift 4, it's not available, or something else is not available. So we can start doing that instead of having these big modules that we have. So
yeah, that's helpful for disclosing what is applicable where, right?
Right.
Because reading README files, it doesn't really scale, right? Like this module is for OCP, not for Kubernetes. Go to the other one. That's the one for Kubernetes, not for OCP. And then you jump to the other one. So if you have a interface like this one, right?
And
you can build a GUI on top of it, or you already have a CLI interface, interactive one.
Yeah, so that's what Matt's team has built, a GUI, prototype GUI, to drag and drop the boxes, and it would need to hook into this back end. So that's one thing. This is JavaScript now. The idea is maybe rebuild it as Go, and then they can integrate with their. But that's separate. But anyway, be able to use that CLI logic as their backend for the UI, and the same metadata.
Yeah,
So-
regardless how you create the manifest file, it's built in the manifest file.
Right. The other thing, like we're doing here in this Garage Terraform modules used to hold all the modules. Now they've been pulled out into their own, but it's still kind of an index of all of them. And like we're generating this file now, I'd like at some point for each of the modules, like this is the AppConnect one, has the metadata here. If you don't provide it, it gets generated from your Terraform, but this lets you give hints like what platforms. I'd like to generate the README from this as well, because right now it's manual, where
I
you say,
see.
look, here's the example usage, here's the dependent modules, but just generate this from that metadata. So like you said, the README is a starting point, but it should match that. So we'll see about automating that piece. Because that's so generally for the modules, that's the direction we're going, and you see some examples here for those. So
Yeah, this also can be used by anyone that wants to do integration testing, right? Of the modules itself, like we're doing with GitHub Actions. Somebody can just put maybe the Cloudpack team wants to use this as end-to-end integration, right? Delete the cluster, create a cluster, deploy the Cloudpack, run the workload, delete it again, deploy the cluster, like repeatable, right? Back to back.
yeah, and the AppConnect module deploys as part of our unit. Each time you make a pull request, it deploys the catalog. It deploys platform navigator, and then it destroys it all when it's done. So we're doing that repeatedly in the development process. But yeah, that could be done as well by the Cloudpack teams. The one wrinkle is that the dashboard for AppConnect requires file storage volumes, and VPC, there are no file storage volumes. You cannot deploy dashboard on a VPC cluster. So
Wait, what?
So it requires, you have to have file storage, not block, for the dashboard, and there is no file storage on VPC cluster. It's all block storage.
But it can be just as file. They may have the name block in their class.
But they block it.
Oh, we have some layer file because we used to have it in Classic. So now they're blocking it to prefer like cloud storage file.
Well, you have to give a storage class, and if you give a block, by default, there's only block. And so I wrote the module that it will find the default storage class and use it, but it has to be file based. So there's a couple of wrinkles in there that we got to work out.
Yeah, we can automate it, right? Find the class that it supports file and use that one.
Right. Right now, it's just
Find the less expensive one.
Right.
Yeah. Sean, Kyle, Sean, Carlos, I've run into this some. I can give a little input if you'd like.
Yeah.
That indeed, we have a project where we needed to use file storage, and which I kind of hate that that's true, but we did. And yeah, what we found is in VPC, so Classic has both block and file, but Sean, like you're saying, VPC right now only has block. It doesn't have file.
Right.
My understanding is it's going to be added to VPC eventually, but I've also been hearing that for about 6 months now. So it's bound to happen eventually.
But I don't think that's a class file. It's just not default.
No, there isn't. There aren't any storage classes, any file storage classes on VPC right now. But now I think you could get it through, like you mentioned, the object storage. You could add the object storage plugin, use object storage bucket as your file storage, which might be something.
That's the most common one.
But that's the one.
Why?
Yeah,
there's something missing there. I think that we're missing something basic.
Supposedly file storage is difficult to get working in VPC, so they're still working on making it work right. So it's taking a while.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think for now maybe cloud object storage may be an answer for certain workloads, right? The same thing as network or NFS, but cloud object storage
So
maybe S3 may be the answer for most workloads.
what we found for our workloads, and maybe your experience will be different, but for the work that we were doing, which is IBM Cloud, not any other platform, is we had to use clusters that were on classic infrastructure, not on VPC, so that we would have access to file storage.
Yeah. So I provisioned a classic one to test because I was pulling my hair out because the error message was could not find storage class, or storage class does not exist, because there's a admission webhook validator right when you create it, so it won't let you even create the CR. But so it says it doesn't exist, not that it's not file. The error is just some generic can't find storage class.
Yeah, just specifying a class that doesn't exist.
No, but it does exist. It's just a block storage, not file storage. So the message is non-specific. So it took me forever to figure
The
out.
name
why
is the
that
same,
happened.
but it's block.
Yeah.
And asking for a file.
Right. And I didn't see in the fine print that for a dashboard, and it's only dashboard because for the designer, it's okay with block storage, but the dashboard requires file. So it's frustrating. So I think the answer long term, we've talked about this, is in our object storage module to set up the storage class plugins automatically. And then you would have file-based storage available on a VPC cluster.
Yep.
Through object storage. Now, how that performs, we'll have to find out. But
Yeah, it's simple workloads. It should be okay.
and I think there's a card for that. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, there is.
Yep. So just add that module as part of your VPC deployments, and the module could have a variable to set the if class is not there, created, right, type of thing, and hook it up as default.
I had a link to the instructions, but there's a plugin where you can basically create storage classes that are backed by your object storage instance. I thought I had the link in here. I'll add it, but that's.
And it's faster to provision also. So that's also a benefit of using cloud object storage. You deploy an app, asking software, I think it used to take 20 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If that's the case. And then if it's cloud object storage, it's just instant, right? It's just HTTPS and should be available bucket.
And if you give enough permission, it will create the bucket for you.
Create the bucket for you. Nice.
Use an existing bucket or create the bucket for you. So we've talked about using that for the workspace for Pecton, perhaps, right? So that you don't pay the penalty of getting a block storage that takes 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I need to drop, but we're still recording, right? Okay. Yeah. I'll watch the rest. I have a conflict.
Okay.
Right.
So, Brian, the private catalog tile video, it may still be.
It's done. I gotta publish it today.
Okay.
Yeah, it's already fully done. And that was the one I sent last week, I think. So yeah, I'll get that up on, I guess, the YouTube channel and then everything else. Is there anywhere else that we're putting those, Larry and Sean? Or is it just the YouTube page, or is there like something for DTE that we were doing?
The video goes in the YouTube channel, and then we need to add a link to it in the DTE catalog.
Okay.
So,
All right. I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
cool.
For anything.
Let me know if you have any questions.
That one should be, for the most part, done once it gets published. And I'll let you know, Sean.
Okay. All right, cool. And then, Larry, for the Quarkus one, looks like there's just a pull request to get that out of the dashboard, and then this is done.
Yeah, I got to add it to the website, but then
Okay.
then it'll be done as well. So
Okay.
I'll
That one's
knock
cool.
that out today.
And then, so the starter kit resource limits, that's, I just need to finish validating the default values, and then I'll push that out. And this has been done in so in our central Helm repo. And so I'm going to update all the starter kits so that they don't have the full starter kit content. They just have the thin shell and point to the central one. So Bobby, this is in relation to I think week before last we talked about having some standard limits based on the type, and then like whether it's Java or JavaScript.
Right. This is excellent. So thank you for getting this done. So I take it this means that when you run an app through the pipeline and it gets deployed into dev, it'll have the sizes specified.
Right. And so there's two pieces, two flags. So we already had I think we called it runtime, but you can specify the runtime and we will default it in those starter kits to say if it's OpenJDK or if it's Node.js or Go. And so it will pick limits based off of that runtime, right? So if you don't provide it, then it defaults to the biggest, which is Java. Or if you want to specify your own limits, you can provide those. So those it takes precedence. If you provide your own limits, that's what gets used. If you don't provide limits, it looks for the runtime and will apply limits based on your runtime. If you don't provide the runtime, we do the Java limit.
Okay, that sounds really good. When we have some docs on how to override the limit, if you want to, I'd like to take a look at those docs. If you'd let me know.
Sure.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
And we'll need to think about Quarkus, what that limit might be. I started this before we had the starter kit, so I think about how to size the Quarkus runtime and how to differentiate between Quarkus and OpenJDK. So we'll kind of revisit that. At worst case, right now it'll be big, and then you can pare it down.
One thing I'm curious about, and I don't mean to take us off on a big tangent, but if you can answer kind of quickly. So we have requests and limits, right? Especially on memory. I'm wondering, are limits bigger than requests, or are they the same size as requests? Because to me, it doesn't make much sense to have the thing grow vertically. So I'm thinking maybe they should be the same.
I made them twice as big, but I think it's worth the discussion. And the other thing I would like to incorporate, not just the values, but some guidelines on a process to follow to how to determine those values, because it's a bit of a dark art right now. If you go read the documentation, it's not clear on how to do it. And if we can hook in with use sysdig, look at the limits, the monitoring that's being done on your pod, and how to collect that information and use it as the basis for your limits, or however we do it, right? But kind of walk through what's the process to determine what these good values are. So right now the limit is twice the request, but I went back and forth on what's the right thing to do there.
So you're right. I agree that what I've looked at in the docs, it does seem like kind of a dark art. So I was curious to see what you'd come up with if you had a better plan than I have so far.
Maybe we sync up on, like you said, once it's out there, get a chance for you to look through it, and then meet to talk through what the strategy would be for how we do that. Because I did find a tool. It's a part of another offering from somebody, third party, that like, hey, if you use if you're using this monitoring tool, you can run this script and it will gather, it'll look at the monitoring metrics and it will spit out what your limit should be. And maybe at some point that would be worthwhile. I don't know if it's that complex that you can't just look at it in sysdig, but at least providing some kind of guidance on what they should be set to.
Okay. One of my teams has an intention, it may be a couple months from now, but to maybe hopefully write some testing to show that when you set the quota on a project, that it actually gets enforced. So at that time, we might be able to use that to have at least a little practical experience with what happens when you set these limits and how do they get enforced.
Right. Well, yeah, and right now, right, we're just talking about the pod limits, but as you brought up, like project quotas, and how does that fit in, right? Kind of a more holistic view of how to manage these things.
Right. I don't necessarily expect you to do project quotas for the toolkit. I don't think that's necessarily within your scope unless you decide otherwise. But for what we're doing, we definitely want to do project quotas, and so that's where this may intersect.
Right. I don't know that we would automate any of it, but in that the guidelines for how to go about it, right, at least make mention of it, if not go into a little bit of detail on what should go into that. And again, if there's a better place where that lives, right? If we just give a surface level pass through it, say, hey, here's a deep dive, and whether it's a good resource that wherever it lives, within the architecture center or out somewhere else that somebody else has, then we're happy to link out. But
Okay.
we'll see. Like a lot of the content we have is because there's no content anywhere else, or it's fragmented, right? So.
Yeah, so down the road, the teams I'm working with love to publish, and so it may be a while, but down the road, who knows? We might start publishing some stuff on this.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Because we're specifically interested in projects and quotas, but another place where this happens is horizontal pod autoscaler.
Right.
Everybody says you should use one, and then nobody seems to tell you how you're supposed to set it up.
Right. Also, though, I found some of the settings are not as valuable unless you're using Istio. So, because you're limited on what you can with HPA, what you can base it off of. But limits is the starting point. You have to have limits before you can do any HPA.
You mean the resource types in HPA? There aren't very many.
Right. Yeah, it's basically CPU and memory.
I remember that. Okay.
With Istio, you can expand it based on number of requests and latency and some other stuff. But
response time.
Yeah,
okay.
the starting point is limits to be able to do the HPA, and then you can kind of go from there to be more sophisticated.
You remember we had another WAS product, WebSphere Extended Edition or something?
Mm-hmm.
We're reinventing what we had in WAS like 10 or 15 years ago.
Rebuilding it in a container platform.
And even when we came out with that 15 years ago, apparently the Z people looked at it and went, "Oh yeah, we've been doing that for 30 years."
Right. Yeah, a lot of this is just trying to push what was in Z 20 years ago out to distributed. All right, cool. Yeah, so we'll should be able to finish that this week.
Cool.
So another thing, and I think before you joined, Bobby, we talked about a lot of the documentation cleanup. One of the other items was this cleaning up the Argo CD documentation and pulling it in. So we have it in the tool guide right now, but really the goal is to have it as a like a getting started Hello World walkthrough. That's part of why it's a little disjointed right now. So to get a step-by-step, we assume the starting point is you did deploy an app already, and now here are the steps to promote that app with Argo, and some of it is just taking what's already there and just moving it into a different location. But generally the idea is those guidelines or the getting started should be, there's like an overview that's generic documentation, but then some little lab or little exercises where step-by-step do this on a kind of Hello World type application. And then the tool guides, the idea is deeper information about, hey, I want to do X, how do I do that? Not so much straight through, but here's how you would configure Argo CD to integrate with well, that one's not a good example. Authenticate on OpenShift, that's an easy one. But if you want to have Argo CD permissions, right, by project, how do you do that? And so that's the idea. The tool guide should be more specific. Here's how you push buttons in Argo CD to make it work, versus here's kind of end to end how to promote an application. So that refactoring is happening this week as well. And then so two more in here. I think we talked around everything else, but so the linter for how to lint. So
hi Sean, sorry I'm late. Yeah, it's completed, and complete the starter kits as well for the Docker files. Made the pull request.
Okay.
And updated the logic for header lint. It says that if you, just similar to image scan, there is a toggle. If you set it to true, it will lint it. And if you set it to false, it will skip that step. If you set it to true and you don't set any header lint file, it will run the default header lint configuration. It will not ignore any rule. It will run the Docker file. If it finds any error, it will stop the pipeline and show the errors, saying that these are the errors on your Docker file. Unfortunately, I cannot show you right now. The cluster that I used to work on is gone. But I may rerun it and demonstrate before you accept the changes, if you want. And then if you have a different header lint file, let's say you want to ignore one rule, I don't know why you want to do that, since you have the toggle button to say that, hey, I just want the I don't want linter at the first place. But if you just want to ignore one rule out of all the rules that has the capability as well, you give a header lint file, ignore that rule, and then it runs and it runs the pipeline. If there's no error, it just says no error found and continues.
So if you say false, does it still run the linter? It just doesn't fail, or it doesn't run a linter?
So if you
at all?
say false, it doesn't print anything. It just skips, similar to image scan. It says, if you don't want to scan it, I'm not going to scan it. It says user decided to skip the linter, and it continues the pipeline.
Okay.
Running the pipeline. But if you set to true, then, and you do nothing, it runs the linter. If there's an error, it stops the pipeline. If there's no error, it runs the pipeline. But let's say you want to run the pipeline, but there's something that you're not sure, you like it your way, you say, I just want to ignore that rule. I think my best practice is better than yours. You give it to the header lint file. You add that header lint file into your root, and it runs it and skips that rule for you. It says that you're skipping this rule, and then continues executing it.
All right. So generally, you might want to just think about it. Change that from a true or false to on, off, or warn. But I'll create a separate story. So you could say, I don't want you to fail, but I want you still to print for both scan image and header lint, right? So
Okay.
it still runs, it spits out the results, but it doesn't fail the pipeline.
Okay. Okay, I'll do that.
So, but maybe that's a third option. Because
Yep,
there
I
may
can
be
check.
environments with it. Well, let's just go with keep what you have right now, and then we'll look across the board if that's kind of a model we want to follow for that. Yeah, so we'll go forward with that because it does match the scan image, and then look at making change across the two.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right.
Thank you.
And Hollis, I saw you. Are you still on?
Hey, yes.
Hey.
So I'm working through how to kind of expose an API through App Connect. And I think it's been a while since I touched App Connect, so I was just kind of running through what I previously done for State Farm. And then this is where I hit a problem with the cluster I was working on. So if I can use yours, Sean, that you mentioned this morning, I can kind of test out to make sure the pipeline works, and then I was going to refactor to get the inventory app you mentioned to kind of get that working.
Okay.
So right now, still kind of work in progress. I was just having a bunch of cluster issues.
Yeah. So just so you know, we have that cluster at least for this week. I'll see if we can extend it, but we may have to find a new home for all of our clusters. But at least for this week, we have it, and we'll see if we can hold off the guillotine on all of our clusters. Because I think we may have to rehost them somewhere else. But because that's going to put a damper in a lot of stuff. Because all of our automation, or all of our modules, they're deploying to the cluster to validate it with each change. And there's a lot of interaction with it. We have at least one cluster, dev cluster, we use all the time, and then another one for demos. And I created the one I sent you is another one I created that's classic infrastructure, so we can we have the file storage and everything else. So, and it's pretty beefy to be able to support Cloud Pak for integration workloads.
Yeah, and on that new cluster, do you want me to install CP4I, or were you going to?
So I actually did this morning using the module. And
okay.
Cool. It worked well. So there was just one hiccup when I installed, in that it was a configuration issue on my fault. On my part, it put the entitlement secret in the wrong namespace, so I had to manually move it. But otherwise, it's deployed, and all four components. I don't know if there's anything more for App Connect we need, but also all four components are out there: switch server, integration server, designer, and dashboard. So that they're there. Now, one thing I think we can work on with the pipe, if any of that, like if as part of the pipeline, whether it's the Tecton pipeline or the CD pipeline, we need to push something into the dashboard, say, then we may need to create a config map or a secret in the tools namespace with the credentials and the whatever is needed to access it. So there might be a little more configuration we need to add to do for the plumbing. But we can work that out.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, cool. So I think the Knative stuff has been on the back burner at this point. So that's all it's in progress. We've talked about some of the backlog. A lot of the high priority is documentation, fixing broken links, and fixing our process so that we can't push with broken links anymore. We got busy cleaning up structure and whatever and did not pay close attention to the links that we were breaking along the way. So that we'll fix all that and make sure that doesn't happen again. Another item we talked about was putting together a must gather script. So when there is a problem, particularly with Terraform, a way to go collect the information that we need, and maybe as part of that, improve the logging in the Terraform modules. Because a lot of times what happens is the Terraform module will fail because some state in the cluster is not where we expect it to be, but the detail of what failed and why it failed is in the cluster, not in the Terraform log. So where we can output the state of the cluster so that we have that there. But more often than not, we're not going to be able to do that. So, having a script to be able to pull that state to then create an issue. Because a lot of times when an issue is created, it takes a couple times back and forth to get enough information to understand the situation and do anything about it. So automating that. And then actually last week in Fast Start, this came up quite a bit of kind of an architectural point of view on the tools that are part of the framework, where we have open source, where there are IBM equivalents to kind of upsell or whatever. So putting a kind of a view, we have that one picture that we use all the time, that's the components, but putting a view that here's the the IBM reference architecture equivalent of this. So those are some that came out last week. So I'll stop there. Anything else any other topics that we want to cover? 5 minutes.
You don't need to cover, Sean. Do you need to assign any of the backlog? I can take the broken links.
Yes, if you're I know, Brian, you were looking at some of that, but if
I was gonna say, yeah, Orhan, we can split that up if you want. I know there's like 50 of them or
I
something.
think there are 50 top level, but I don't think that's all of them. So,
Yeah.
Yep. No, I'm happy to go through the website and start clicking links. It's good for me to read, learn, and check if link is working or not.
okay. And there are some tools, like there's a linter, right? That, like, as I was saying, have it as part of the build process, validate all those, at least all the internal links, make sure they're correct.
Mhm.
So if you two coordinate on that, maybe split the story or whatever makes sense.
Yeah. I'll Slack you after this. Orhan, we can figure it
Okay.
out.
Thanks, Frank.
While y'all are working on broken links, Sean, can you bring up issue 685?
This one?
This is part of the same theme, so you might as well work on this list as well. It probably overlaps or something, So there's probably some overlap and stuff, but probably worth coordinating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll move it to the top with the others. Yeah, so take a look at this one. There may be overlap, but certainly take a look at this if we can close out that story along with those others. Maybe start there because it's a very focused set.
And it was reported by a user, so
Right.
good to try to make them happy.
Absolutely. Okay, I don't see any other items just to jump out, but we do have a big backlog, 200 items. Some of them are new technical features and some of them are some broken things. Like we still need to prioritize this this one. So a lot of this has been fixed. I don't know, Bob, you created this, you probably remember this. A lot of this has been fixed, but we just need to get legal sign off that we're using proper images and everything. So we'll get that addressed. That's limiting some of where the dev guide can be linked or links can be added. That's done. Okay. So anyone else?
That issue document, who it was that came up with that list?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, it might be worth going back to them again for, if we think we fixed everything, going back to them for another scan.
Well, I sent it, and yeah, there's some back and forth. We just schedule a meeting and do it. And there's a fundamental disagreement on their perspective on these things. So that's arguing with lawyers. It's not fun, but
okay. Well, okay. So as long as you're on top of it, then I won't butt in.
Well, no, so yeah, there's some, but we just need to get on. So it's been kind of a back and forth. I think we just need to schedule a meeting and go through it. Maybe bring the lawyer involved in and get it done. But I don't know, because we're using all of the, commons attribution for all the images under the guidelines that they lay out. So I don't see that there should be any issue, but seems to be some disagreement on some of them. So
yeah, point that out to the lawyer and ask, why are you not happy with this?
Right. Yeah. Like they've said across the board, IBM cannot use the Jenkins logo. It's like, I don't know how you can do that if we're using it under the guidelines that has been laid out. So
yeah, really,
we'll get that worked out.
Okay.
But there is, and that's part of the documentation going forward. Where did that go? Oh, it's in the dev guide. Just quickly, I spent a long time that's not it. Contributing. It's under the contributing. Like, hey, if you're going to add to the if you're going to add to this documentation, here's the standards for images. You have to pick from one of these, or you have to submit a new one. I'm trying to figure out, remember where that documentation went, but it's in here. Oh, anyway. So, and providing attribution in the legal documentation for every single one of our images. So, it's just a matter of going through that with them.
By the way, it occurs to me, while Brian and others are going through and looking for broken links, another theme I ran into as I was doing searches to try to find references is there's a fair number of dead pages in the docs as well. So one, if you can find pages that on the one hand have problems, but on the other hand, there doesn't seem to be a good way to navigate to anyway, then don't fix the page, delete it,
Yeah.
I would say too, related with that, especially since Carlos is doing a great job of writing scripts to find stuff. Part of what you might want to do is sort of a garbage collector on the dev guide, which starts out with the index and first of all, what all pages are actually in the table, or what is that file called? Index, table of contents.
The nav items or whatever that one.
Yeah,
It's
not nav items. There we go. So first of all, if a page is in the list of nav items, then definitely we want to keep it. Second of all, if you can navigate from one of those pages to another one, but it's not in the list of nav items, I would question, well, why isn't it in the list of nav items? If it's an important page. So if you can navigate to it, then we kind of want to keep it, but I think it should probably also be in the nav items. But then maybe if you can come up with a list, if a script can navigate and find all the things that it can navigate to, and then you find that there's other pages that exist in the repo, let's delete those.
Well, part of the issue is too, and I have to drop, but part of the issue is you can only have 2 levels deep in the nav items.
Right, right.
So sometimes it's by design. It's not great navigation, but sometimes it's by design. Other times it's just because they are dead. So
and not making that
yeah,
nav items 10 miles long.
Yeah, if it's that we're intentionally doing a third level and you just can't add it into the nav items, then okay, that's probably not ideal, but so be it, good enough. On the other hand, if it's a page that was written 3 years ago and nobody seems to have done anything with since,
right.
I would say probably delete it. And if you don't want to delete it because you can navigate to it, well, then I would question, why can you navigate to this? Is it really helpful?
Right. Yeah. Or there's the links otherwise. Okay.
So anyway, that's why I nuked the homework directories. I just said, I don't think we're using this anymore.
Yeah, some of it was there as reference, but we haven't used it in a long time. So yeah, those were good to get rid of.
And if anybody tried to use it, it would probably the results would probably be scary.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what it would work. It's a challenge, right? See if you can figure it out. Work through the bad instructions.
The MOOC.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and some of it's not that they're bad. It's just stuff has changed so much since then that they no longer are valid. But all right, cool. We'll talk again later. Stop recording and then.
Sounds good.